In the early 1960s, a fragile, uneasy peace draped itself across a world teetering on the razor's edge of nuclear annihilation. The two emerging superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union, were locked in a struggle unlike any before it, a conflict defined not by open warfare, but by shadows, by secrets, and by the relentless, often unseen pursuit of technological advantage. This was the Cold War, a duel fought in back alleys, in clandestine radio broadcasts, and most critically, in the minds of the engineers and scientists on both sides of the Iron Curtain. At the heart of this global struggle was a desperate, urgent need for information, for the ground truth that could mean the difference between strategic stability and global catastrophe. It was in this crucible of fear and uncertainty that a single man, a profoundly disillusioned Soviet colonel, would step out of the shadows and set in motion a technological duel that would bring the world to the brink of war, and then, miraculously, pull it back. This is the story of that man, the revolutionary engineering he revealed, and the equally ingenious engineering of espionage that allowed his secrets to reach the West.
The strategic context for what would become one of the most dangerous espionage operations of the entire Cold War was dominated by a powerful and pervasive fear, encapsulated in two words: the missile gap. This terrifying concept was born from the profound technological and psychological shock of the Soviet Union's successful Sputnik 1 launch on October 4, 1957. The small beeping satellite proved unequivocally that the Soviets possessed advanced rocket technology, specifically the R-7 Semyorka booster, powerful enough to hurl a warhead not just across Europe, but across continents. The missile gap quickly metastasized from a classified intelligence concern into a potent political weapon in the United States. It alleged that the Eisenhower administration had allowed the Soviets to gain a decisive and terrifying lead in the production and deployment of intercontinental ballistic missiles, or ICBMs. Democratic politicians, including the ambitious presidential candidate John F. Kennedy, campaigned heavily on this perceived vulnerability, painting a dire picture of an America exposed to what Kennedy termed cataclysmic peril in the face of rocketing Soviet military might. The irony, the dangerous, unspoken truth held at the highest levels of the U.S. government was that the missile gap, as popularly described, was largely a myth. High-altitude reconnaissance from the top-secret U-2 spy plane, a marvel of aeronautical engineering in its own right, began to erode the myth of a missile gap, revealing a far smaller Soviet arsenal than feared. By early 1960, the CIA estimated the Soviets had only a handful of operational first-generation ICBMs, while the U.S. arsenal was growing rapidly. However, this vital, reassuring intelligence was itself one of the most closely guarded secrets in the world. To reveal the full extent of the U-2's findings would be to compromise one of the West's most critical and irreplaceable intelligence assets. This illusion was shattered on May 1, 1960, when Francis Gary Powers' U-2 was shot down over Sverdlovsk by an SA-2 surface-to-air missile, abruptly ending the vital overflights. The intelligence tap was shut off, and the true nature of the Soviet arsenal was once again plunged into darkness, making the need for a human source more desperate than ever. The true intelligence void, the one that genuinely terrified Pentagon and NATO planners, was not in the number of Soviet ICBMs aimed at the American heartland. It was in the vast and opaque arsenal of Soviet medium-range ballistic missiles and intermediate-range ballistic missiles, or RBMs and IRBMs. These were the thousands of weapons, like the R-12 SS-4 Sandal, and the R-14 SS-5 Skene that held every major European city hostage, from London and Paris to Bonn. In an era before comprehensive satellite coverage, a photograph of a missile on a launch pad revealed dangerously little. It could not tell you the weapon's precise range, its payload, or the destructive yield of its warhead. It could not reveal the type of volatile fuel it used, or the accuracy of its guidance system. And most critically, a photograph could not reveal the system's operational readiness timeline, the precise countdown required to take a missile from safe state to launch ready. In the terrifying calculus of nuclear war, this single detail is the difference between stability and Armageddon. Western analysts desperately lacked the technical manuals, the schematics, the ground truth, the engineering data needed to translate ambiguous images into actionable intelligence. The man who would fill this perilous void was Colonel Oleg Vladimirovich Penkovsky of the GRU, Soviet Military Intelligence. Far from a peripheral figure, Penkovsky was a decorated combat veteran and a product of the system's finest institutions, including the Frunze and Dzerzhinsky military academies, where he studied rocket artillery. His position was bolstered by powerful patrons, including his close personal friend and mentor, Marshal Sergei Vorontsov, the Chief Marshal of Tactical Missile Forces. This connection was the critical key to Penkovsky's extraordinary access to the innermost secrets of the Soviet strategic rocket forces. His official post, assigned in November 1960, served as the perfect cover. As the Deputy Chief of the Foreign Department of the State Committee for Science and Technology, GKNT, he had a legitimate reason to meet with Western businessmen and diplomats and to handle the very scientific and technical documents MI6 and the CIA so desperately craved. Penkovsky's motivations were a complex cocktail of genuine ideological terror, deep personal resentment, and a powerful vanity. He expressed a genuine fear of Nikita Khrushchev, whom he saw as a reckless leader capable of blundering into a nuclear holocaust. As he later stated, he saw himself as a soldier-warrior for the free world, a man on a historic mission to prevent a global catastrophe. Yet, this conviction was sharpened by profound personal bitterness. His military career had stalled when he reported a superior son for corruption. The final blow came when a background check unearthed that his father, whom he never knew, had been a White Army officer killed fighting the Bolsheviks. For the paranoid Soviet system, this ancestral sin was unforgivable. His promotion was permanently blocked. He bitterly expressed this to his Western handlers, stating, "They don't trust me. They'll never make me a general. I am judged not for my service, but for the ghost of my father." Driven by pride as much as principle, Penkovsky believed only he could reveal the truth behind the Soviet facade. He would find his validation by striking at the very heart of the system that had spurned him. According to later accounts, it began with a single act of defiance, a letter slipped to Western students on a Moscow bridge, making an explicit offer to spy for the United States. This audacious act was the opening move in a deadly, high-stakes game. To the CIA, he was Hero, the West's most valuable agent inside the Soviet war machine.
To harness the potential of an asset like Penkovsky, a joint team of Britain's MI6 and America's CIA deployed a suite of technologies that represented the pinnacle of 1960s espionage. This was a system of tools designed to allow one man, under extreme pressure, to collect and transmit vast amounts of technical information securely.
The cornerstone of his collection efforts was a sub-miniature camera, a masterpiece of mechanical engineering revered by intelligence agencies. Small enough to be concealed in everyday objects, it used a specialized film format that could hold dozens of exposures. Using this camera, Penkovsky photographed thousands of pages of Soviet secrets, often during stolen moments in his government office. The simple, quiet operation of the camera made it possible to work quickly and efficiently, with each tiny click of the shutter a moment of extreme peril. While the camera was for sending information out, a different technology was required to get instructions in. Penkovsky received his orders, meeting times, dead drop locations, and target wish lists via a commercially available Panasonic shortwave radio. Owning such a radio was a common hobby and would, by itself, not arouse suspicion. At prearranged times, Penkovsky would tune to a designated frequency and listen to a numbers station. These mysterious stations, operated by intelligence agencies, transmitted endless strings of numbers, often in an emotionless pre-recorded voice. This one-way voice link, or OVWL, was inherently secure. The transmission blanketed a wide area, making it impossible for counterintelligence to determine who the intended recipient was. The agent remained entirely passive, electronically invisible. The strings of numbers he copied down were encrypted messages. The key to unlocking them was the one-time pad. Penkovsky was supplied with minuscule, easily concealed pads of paper, each filled with columns of truly random number groups. The one-time pad is the only cryptographic system mathematically proven to be unbreakable, provided it is used correctly. The key, the random numbers, must be used only once and then immediately and permanently destroyed. The operational process was a simple exercise in mental arithmetic. Penkovsky would apply the numbers from his pad to the numbers in the encrypted message using a prearranged system of modular arithmetic. The resulting numbers would correspond to a codebook revealing the plaintext message. He would then meticulously destroy the used page, most likely by burning it to ash. This suite of tools, the miniaturized camera, the consumer-grade radio, and the mathematically perfect one-time pad, formed a complete, closed-loop system for clandestine operations.
The intelligence collected by Penkovsky, thousands of exposed frames on tiny film cassettes, was worthless as long as it remained in his Moscow apartment. It had to be physically transported out of the most heavily surveilled city on Earth, requiring a pipeline engineered for covert exfiltration. The critical human link in this pipeline was Greville Maynard Wynne, an electrical engineer and international businessman. Recruited by MI6, Wynne was an access agent, an amateur whose immense value lay in his legitimate cover story. His business, brokering industrial equipment, required him to make frequent, officially sanctioned trips to Moscow. This business provided the perfect, impeachable rationale for him to meet directly with Colonel Penkovsky, whose own cover job was to coordinate such technical exchanges. The fit was perfect. MI6 and the CIA gambled that the supreme strength of Wynne's cover as a slightly bumbling businessman would outweigh his operational inexperience, making him the ideal innocuous courier. Operating in Moscow required adherence to the Moscow rules. Assume nothing, never be predictable. Assume everyone is potentially under opposition control.
The operational environment was one of total pervasive surveillance by the omnipotent KGB. Given this atmosphere, the physical transfer of intelligence was the moment of maximum danger. While Penkovsky and Wynne did meet openly at business dinners, allowing for live drops, where packages could be passed in a briefcase, the preferred method was the dead drop. A dead drop breaks the chain of direct contact. Penkovsky would secrete a package in a prearranged, concealed location. Hours or days later, Wynne would independently visit the site to retrieve it. This simple temporal separation eliminated the risk of both agents being captured together. A subtle, innocuous signal, like a chalk mark on a telephone pole, would be left in a separate location to indicate that the drop was loaded. Beyond human surveillance, the exfiltration pipeline faced a specific technological threat: Soviet customs inspections. Security services were equipped with X-ray machines to inspect luggage leaving the country. A single burst of X-rays would instantly fog the high-sensitivity film, destroying Penkovsky's work. To neutralize this threat, a simple but effective piece of countermeasure engineering was employed: a lead-lined container. The device was a small, rugged box, its walls constructed with a thick layer of solid lead, which is highly effective at absorbing and blocking X-rays. The exposed Minox film cassettes were placed inside, and the container was sealed. When Greville Wynne's luggage passed through a customs checkpoint, the dense lead shielding would prevent the X-rays from penetrating, protecting the delicate, undeveloped film. The intricate system of collection and exfiltration served a single monumental purpose: to deliver Oleg Penkovsky's intelligence to analysts in Washington and London. The product of this perilous pipeline, codenamed IRONBARK, was a comprehensive trove of hard engineering data that would fundamentally alter the strategic balance of power at the single most dangerous moment in human history. Over the 18 intense months of his operation, from April 1961 until his arrest in October 1962, Penkovsky photographed thousands of pages of the Soviet Union's most sensitive, classified documents. Its most vital components were the complete technical and operational manuals for the Soviet Union's premier theater ballistic missiles. The two most important systems he exposed, the very systems that would soon appear 90 miles from American shores, were the R-12, NATO codename SS-4 Sandal, a mobile, single-stage, liquid-propellant medium-range ballistic missile, or MRBM, and the R-14, NATO codename SS-5 Skane, a larger, more powerful intermediate-range ballistic missile, or IRBM. These manuals, stolen from the desks of his colleagues, were the ground truth Western intelligence had been seeking. They contained engineering schematics, performance specifications, fueling procedures, and the exact step-by-step launch sequences. This was the granular engineering data that no spy plane photograph could ever provide. On October 14, 1962, a U-2 flight over Cuba returned with shocking images. Analysts at the National Photographic Interpretation Center, or NPIC, spotted the telltale signs of ballistic missile launch sites being constructed at an alarming pace. The hardware on the ground was unmistakable, but a critical question remained. Which missiles were they? At NPIC,
Analysts retrieved the precious manuals Penkovsky had supplied. They laid the grainy U-2 photographs side by side with the precise technical diagrams from the stolen Soviet manuals. The match was perfect, immediate, and terrifying. Analysts could positively, definitively identify the missiles as the SS-4 Sandal and the larger SS-5 Skane. The Penkovsky manuals immediately erased all ambiguity. The SS-4 had a range of approximately 1,200 miles, capable of striking Washington, D.C. The SS-5 could reach almost every city in the continental U.S. This was a direct, strategic assault on the American homeland. But Penkovsky's data provided something far more strategically decisive. As President John F. Kennedy convened his Executive Committee, or EXCOM, to debate a response, the options were stark: an airstrike, an invasion, or a blockade. The military leadership argued forcibly for an immediate, massive airstrike, fearing the missiles could become operational at any moment. The entire debate hinged on one critical variable: the readiness timeline. A U-2 photo could show a missile on a launch pad, but not if it was 10 minutes from launch or 10 hours. This is where Penkovsky's stolen operational manuals became so vital. The manuals detailed the complex, cumbersome, and dangerous fueling procedures. These were not modern push-button weapons. They used corrosive liquid propellants, and the entire process, erecting the missile, fueling, and targeting, was lengthy and delicate. The intelligence, as provided by Penkovsky's stolen manuals, was clear. His documents revealed that Soviet medium-range missiles required many hours of preparation, giving the U.S. precious time to act. This single piece of hard engineering data changed the calculus of the crisis. It meant that Kennedy was not facing an immediate hair-trigger threat. He had a window. He had time. Time to consider his options, to deploy a naval blockade, which he codenamed a quarantine, and to engage in the high-stakes diplomacy that would defuse the crisis. His intelligence became one of the most critical foundations for Kennedy's measured response during the Cuban Missile Crisis.
The tragic final irony of Oleg Penkovsky's story is its timing. His greatest contribution to the West unfolded at the very moment his own operational security was collapsing. While the EXCOM in Washington debated, the KGB, after 2 years of mounting suspicion, was closing its net. The exact method of his capture remains debated. Regardless of the final trigger, the intense KGB surveillance, which Penkovsky himself had noted with growing paranoia, finally bore fruit. On October 22, 1962, the very same day President Kennedy delivered his televised speech announcing the quarantine of Cuba, Oleg Penkovsky was arrested in Moscow. His courier, Greville Wynne, was lured to Budapest and then arrested days later. In May 1963, they were put on a widely publicized show trial. Penkovsky was found guilty of high treason. The Soviet state news agency TASS officially reported that Oleg Penkovsky was executed by shooting on May 16, 1963. Greville Wynne was sentenced to 8 years in a labor camp. He served 11 months before being exchanged in April 1964 for the Soviet master spy Conan Molody, known as Gordon Lonsdale, a classic spy swap on Berlin's Bridge of Spies. The system's revenge extended to Penkovsky's mentor,
Marshal Sergei Vorontsov, who had vouched for Penkovsky, was summarily stripped of all his titles, demoted in rank, and expelled from the Communist Party. He was reduced to a non-person, a stark testament to the unforgiving consequences of Penkovsky's betrayal.
The legacy of Oleg Penkovsky is profound and complex. He was a man driven by a volatile mix of genuine conviction, personal vanity, and corrosive bitterness. He was, by the laws of his nation, a traitor. Yet the intelligence he provided, at the cost of his own life, directly shaped the outcome of the single most dangerous confrontation in human history. The missile gap as a public panic had been a political fiction, but Penkovsky exposed the real missile gap, the terrifying, tangible arsenal of Soviet theater missiles that held Europe hostage. He provided the hard data that allowed the West to finally, accurately calibrate its strategic response, replacing fearful speculation with cold, hard fact. In the end, the entire Penkovsky operation was a duel of engineering. The Soviet Union engineered weapons of terrifying power. In response, the West deployed the engineering of espionage, the precision camera, the perfect cryptography of the one-time pad, and the clandestine pipeline. The ultimate testament to Penkovsky's legacy is found in the technical annexes of the Cuban Missile Crisis records. The most important piece of intelligence he provided was not a war plan, but a mundane engineering specification, the fueling timeline. This simple fact, derived from a stolen manual, broke the cycle of immediate escalation. It gave President Kennedy the one commodity more valuable than any missile: time. Time to think, time to plan, and time to allow his Soviet counterpart to look into the abyss and find a way to step back. In the shadows of the Cold War, Penkovsky's betrayal of his own system bought the West time, and perhaps peace.